Good evening, everybody, and welcome into another episode of New England Sports Weekly. As always, I am your host, Sean Metcalf, and sorry about the little bit of a delay there. Had some issues loading the live stream, but we're up and running, and we're ready to go. As it has been a couple weeks since we've been on, had some things going on, but we are nonetheless back and at it here for another episode. And I hope that you guys, if you're on a winter vacation, spring break, whatever you want to call it this time of year, I hope you're having fun. If you're hopefully you're down someplace warm, maybe Florida or somewhere, enjoying the sun. Maybe you're down catching RedSox spring training, whatever you may be doing. Or if you're stuck up here in the Northeast here, up in Maine or Massachusetts or wherever in New England that you may be, digging out of all the snow that we've gotten lately, which cross your fingers. Maybe we'll maybe in the next couple of weeks we'll start to see it slow down and start to warm up, as we're already in March and we're actually 29 days away from opening day with the Red Sox as they get ready to take on the Baltimore Orioles at home, which looking out the window today, you're like, no way in hell they're going to be ready for that day. Or if they are, it's going to be cold on that day. But that's 29 days away. We have more exciting, well, I shouldn't say more, well, let's be honest, more exciting things happening than the Red Sox right now. As much as it pains me to say, we do. We have a lot going on. So without further ado, we will just dive right into our out of the box segment, as we normally do each and every show. It is still brought to you by me. If any of those lovely sponsors out there, maybe 47 brand, maybe one of those lovely brands out there might want to step up to the plate, we'll hawk your product here on the air. I will shamelessly do that for you. But the out of the box segment, we will kick it off with some news that obviously by now you probably already know, but it's the big one, as the Boston Bruins traded for Dmitry Orlov, the defenseman from the Capitals, along with his teammate Garnett Hathaway. And actually, he is a local kid. And when I say local for Maine, he is, because he is from Kennebunk, Maine. So he comes home to his hometown team after spending with both Orlov and Hathaway spending most of their career with the Washington Capitals. Now, Dmitry Orlov was the bigger prize there, as he is the defenseman that can be in the one of the top four pairing, or not pairings, but one of the top four defensemen, one of the top two pairings, and has been playing with actually Charlie McAvoy and switched off with Hampus Lindholm last game against Calgary last night, and that was a bona fide starring pair last night. We'll get into that game here in just a second, but that trade went down last week. So the Boston Bruins are already busy ahead of trade deadline. Will they do anything else here, as the trade deadline is Friday at 3 p.m. So the Boston Bruins still have some time to improve the team if they want to, as they are dealing with some injuries. It appears to be more short term with Nick Foligno and Taylor Hall. But the Bruins, we'll see how they react, if they want to go ahead and add anything else. Although the rest of the league has been making a lot of moves, as though the New York Rangers, who are in the Metro division, did add a big trade chip in Patrick Kane yesterday or 2 days ago by now. So that was the big splash in the last week or so. There have obviously been guys out there that I was kind of hoping maybe Boston would look at, maybe in a Ryan O'Reilly or a Tarasenko from the Blues, but those two have been moved as well. But the Bruins did make their splash, and Orlov is a top two pairing defenseman, so that they didn't go after, because I was kind of a little bit worried there. They were linked to the Columbus Blue Jackets for their defenseman, who they were willing to give up a first round pick, but for a guy that would be a little bit more depth than what Orlov ends up being with when you actually get a legitimate top 4 defenseman and Dmitry Orlov that you could pair as well. So I like that trade better than I did with Columbus if that one had come to fruition. But and of course on the ice, the Bruins have gone 4-0 in their Western Canada trip as they finished it off last night with a comeback win against the Calgary Flames. At one point, they were up 2-0 with Dmitry Orlov, their newest addition, had his first 2 goals as a member of the Boston Bruins, showing he's more than just a defensive defenseman and can shoot the puck, and actually played very well last night and had a 3-point game with an assist that ended up being that game winner to Pavel Zacha. But the Bruins ended up falling down 3-2 late in the game. They tied it up on that aforementioned Zacha goal. And then in overtime, the Bruins looked absolutely gassed. And you could tell that they were ready to just fly home and take today off and just rest up for tomorrow night's game. But they were gassed. You could tell that so much, because David Pastrnak, who we all know is among the stars in the league. He's a top 5 player, or at least offensive player in the league. He just looked gassed at the end of the game. But Brad Marchand got the puck on the left wing, took it up the sideboards, and was able to turn on his skates and flick it over to Bergeron, and just magic just happened when he fed it over to McAvoy for the game winner, who was wide open. And I mean, it was just weird to see 2 Calgary Flames behind the net when, remember, in overtime it's 3-on-3 hockey. So you got 2 of your players behind the net battling one Boston Bruin, and so it's a 2-on-1 situation. And McAvoy made him pay. They won in overtime. But even more impressive was Linus Ullmark's 56 saves, which set a Bruins record. So he had 56 saves on, 62 shots on goal. Or not 62, 59 shots on goal, because they got 3 goals. Math, not my strong suit. But yeah, the 56 saves on those 59 shot attempts on goal, and the Bruins walked away with a win. And Linus Ullmark is all but cemented as the Vezina Trophy winner for the best goalie in the NHL. So we will see how things go here down the stretch, as they are just absolutely on cruise control. It seems as they are far and away ahead in all of the NHL. So they're not just leading the Atlantic or the Eastern Conference. They are just blown past everybody in the entire NHL. And it's not even fun. It's not even close. So we will definitely break that down here in just a moment. And of course, their counterparts at the Boston Garden, the Boston Celtics, did drop their game against the New York Knicks. So, and Jason Tatum had one of his worst games and got ejected in the game 2 nights ago. And it just was not it just was not a pretty sight. They fell down early. They were down by 16 at one point. They were able to cut it to within 9 to 7 points a couple times, but just late in that game, the Celtics just had too much to make up, and they definitely were missing Jaylen Brown. And with Jason Tatum having an off night, and actually really was like his 2nd or 3rd off night in a row, it just was not good basketball being played by the Boston Celtics. So we will definitely jump into that as well as, and the Boston Celtics did drop to the number 2 spot in the Eastern Conference standings, a half game behind the Milwaukee Bucks as well. So they are right there neck and neck with Milwaukee. So it's not as far gone a conclusion as it seems to be with the Boston Bruins as it is with the Celtics. So we will dive into that as well. Now, of course, with the Boston Red Sox, they have kicked off spring training, if you will, down in Fort Myers. They are 3-2 3-0-1 because they have the one tie. Because remember, in spring training, they don't play extra innings. I mean, it's a waste of time. And of course, it's kind of a little compact as far as some of the members of the Red Sox roster that will be going off and playing for their home countries in the World Baseball Classic, which starts next week. So you did see a few more bats than you normally would for some regulars early on here. And of course, the big news, not just for the Red Sox, but all across baseball, was the pitch clock, which has just already in spring training, we're seeing, I know it's spring training, so it's going to be a little bit faster as everybody's just kind of getting their work in and leaving for the day. But still, games are officially what they're averaging in the neighborhood of like 2 hours and 24 minutes. So these games are flying by, absolutely flying by. So even if you kind of look at this for the regular season, if you had another 20 minutes on for some longer at bats, or for maybe you get some other, you get some pitching changes and they go a little bit longer. So if it's 240, 245, 250, you're still going to be under the 3-hour mark. At least that's the way it's kind of trending at this point. Or if it goes at the pace of spring training, which I don't think it's going to be that fast, but I think it'll be in like the 245, we'll probably get down to. It's just, it's awesome. And we'll talk about the effect that it's going to have on baseball. But of course, the Red Sox were right front and center for the biggest, I guess you put, controversy when it comes to the pitch clock on their first official Grapefruit League game, not the game against Northeastern, but their first official game of the year against the Atlanta Braves, where it was a walk-off strike 3 call on a full count. It was just, it was crazy because the bases were loaded. Atlanta was probably going to get like a walk or a hit, probably at the way it was going, and win that game, which it's spring training, so no big deal. But I forget who was at the plate for Atlanta, but he took too long to face the pitcher or be ready or attent to the pitcher. So they ended up calling strike 3. And it was the first instance of a given strike, or called, I don't know if I want to call it called strike or an automatic strike, I guess, if you want to put it that way, that was called to end a game. Now, in the regular season, we'll see if maybe they give them some leeway because they don't want to have a regular season game end that way. No, obviously, in the regular season, you're going to go to extra innings. But we'll see if maybe in a situation where bases are loaded, maybe they give you the benefit of the doubt. They're still going to, obviously, the 20 seconds of the pitch clock is going to be the most important, but we'll see how that kind of all unravels. But that was the big news for the Boston Red Sox. And in the NFL Combine is underway already this week. And tomorrow we'll start to see some actual live action, as far as if you're into guys in their gym shorts and tank tops watching a workout on television, if that gets your blood flowing, I guess. Well, whatever floats your boat, I guess. But I mean, the NFL Combine to me is just a circus or car show, I guess, if you want to say it for the NFL. It has its place, and it definitely is important, where you get to see some of those athletic numbers come across the board that you can kind of put pen to paper and kind of see them if you were kind of stuck under a rock and didn't see some of them during the college football season, or more so for some of those smaller school guys or smaller conference guys that you didn't get to see if you're just watching a lot of SEC, Big 10, Big 12, Pac-12, all those conferences. If you're watching just a lot of those, you'll get to see a little bit more of their showcase going on this weekend with the NFL Combine. Now, of course, the big news for locally was, is Bill Belichick going to be there? And there's been no confirmation either way that's been set in stone that he's been there. So that's a little kind of disconcerting, but hopefully he shows up and hopefully he's there, because at least the official reports where there were 4 coaches, but none of them were Belichick, but then that got refuted. So we'll see how that goes. So that's your out of the box segment this week. And as you mentioned, we're going to just dive right into the main course, if you will, and that's going to be it's going to be a dual winner course. We'll call it the surf and turf here between both of these red hot teams in the Boston Bruins and the Boston Celtics. Now, starting things off with the Boston Bruins, who we mentioned finished their 4-game road sweep up in their trip to Western Canada with that win against the Calgary Flames last night. I mean, we haven't talked in the last probably month or so a lot about the Bruins or the Celtics, really, just because with football wrapping up and with the start of like spring training and some big news of Rafael Devers signing his contract extension, just a lot of things kind of flowing around. But now we kind of get to look here as we're heading down the stretch, because not tomorrow, but Friday is the NHL trade deadline. We're already in March, so we're getting down the home stretch here. Both teams have in the neighborhood of 20 to 22 games left. So they've got about a fourth left of the season. So it's getting close. It's getting close. And the Boston Bruins, as I mentioned, they're just absolutely on fire right now. They cannot lose. It goes to show you last night where I was about to chalk that one up as a loss last night, even though they started out 2-0, but then when you just saw how tired they were, and it looked like they were ready to not give it away from the standpoint that their hearts weren't in it. It was just that physically you could see they were tired and dragging, but they were able to get themselves back together, and they just found something at the end of the game. There's something about this Boston Bruins team that just there's that it factor with it this year where you haven't seen that over the last couple seasons. They fight and claw and scrap for every last inch. I know that is such a cliche, but they really do. They don't give up an inch of ice out there. They even when they're tired, they find a way to win. And last night it was the new guys, especially Dmitry Orlov, who had a 3-point game. He had the 2 goals and the 1 assist, and that helper in the end was big because he found Pavel Zacha, who got the game tire and sent it to overtime with only less than 30 seconds left in the third period. But they just find ways to win. And it's just so fun to watch because remember back into the Vancouver game that started this trip, the Boston Bruins, not the Boston Bruins, all of them, but Linus Ullmark had the goalie goal, and that's only the 13th. No, sorry. It's like the 19th goal of all out of like the 100 years plus of the NHL. It's only like the 19th goal of all time. 19th goal of all time by goalies, and I think he's only the 13th goalie to do it because there are a couple that have multiple. But it's always fun to see a goalie get a goalie goal, and it was on the end. I don't care if it's on the empty net or not. It's just that's 200 feet down the ice, and that puck can slide every which way, but he got it right down the middle and got that goalie goal. And they were all celebrating. So everything is going right for this Boston Bruins team because as of right now, they have 99 points in the standings, which the next closest to them is the Carolina Hurricanes. So the Bruins at 86. So they're 13 points ahead of Carolina. And in their own division, it's the Toronto Maple Leafs are at 82. So the Bruins are they're 16 points ahead. They're so close to being, excuse me, so stuffed up right now. They're so close to being 20 points ahead of the Toronto Maple Leafs they've already blown past the Lightning, who only have 78 points. I mean, they're still going to make it the playoffs, it looks like at this point. But the Bruins are 47, 8, and 5. So 47 wins, 8 regulation losses, and 5 overtime losses. So they just are piling things up. They are just, if you want to look at it even to a bigger standpoint, the Western Conference, they are just blowing away the Western Conference. The Dallas Stars, who they beat earlier a week ago, have 75 points, and the Vegas Golden Knights have 76. So the Bruins are 20 points ahead of those two teams. So it is just ridiculous what the Bruins are doing. They're lapping the field. And this goes back to Linus. To me, obviously, this goes back to Linus Ullmark in the year that he's having. And honestly, that both goalies are having, because Linus Ullmark, like I mentioned earlier, is pretty much cemented in place to win the Vezina Trophy. That's how good he's been. He's having a career year. Now, is this who Linus Ullmark is going to be moving forward? Now, obviously, living in the moment, I'm happy and I don't want to change anything. But I mean, obviously, looking forward, if this is what you, maybe not to this level, but even if he takes like a 5% drop next year, in this is who you have as your franchise goaltender, then man, this is awesome. And Jeremy Swayman, who I thought was going to be the franchise goaltender himself, is playing like a top 5 goalie right now. So the way it's going, it doesn't matter who you throw in net. They're giving you a chance to win every night. But where Linus Ullmark is just head and shoulders above are moments like last night. He is so cool under pressure. The Calgary Flames way outshot the Boston Bruins, because if we look at it, like I mentioned earlier, he had 56 saves on 59 shots, and the Bruins had 4 goals on, what was it, just 20 shots even, or 21 shots? So the Calgary Flames doubled up what the Bruins did. They almost tripled them up. It is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous that Ullmark went out there, set a franchise record, and then in the post-game interview, basically he was a cool customer afterwards. They were asking him, it's like, oh no, it was fun, and it was just going out there and just playing basically, and it was nothing to him. He's got a heart rate of like 62 flat. That's how cool he is. It's ridiculous. I mean, I haven't seen a Bruins goaltender have this type of stretch since probably like the heyday of like Tuukka, probably like, what was it, 2013, when they went to the Cup, when he was unconscious. And we're seeing and I mean, Linus Ullmark's playing even better than that. So I mean, if he's playing this well, it's not like a lock that they're going to be in the Stanley Cup, but if he plays this well, man, this is gonna go a long way towards getting him to that ultimate goal of holding up the cup at the end of the year in June. Now, obviously, the road ahead, when you're looking at the playoff schedule, it's definitely not going to be a cakewalk, because the Eastern Conference is the toughest out of the two between the East and the West. Because you're going to, obviously, Carolina has given them a run for their money each time they played them, and Tampa Bay is always going to be a tough out. It's not the same Tampa Bay team as far as it has been over the last 2 or 3 years, but obviously you have a team that's won 2 Stanley Cups and has some of the best players in the world in Steven Stamkos and Braden Point, and why is he escaping? But you get my drift. It's been a long day, but they are loaded, so you're not going to just be able to skate by, no pun intended there, of the Tampa Bay Lightning. But it's going to be a lot easier if this is how Linus Ullmark plays to the playoffs, and if he has that ice in his veins, if you will, from that standpoint, where just nothing bothers him. Like I thought Tuukka was a cool customer from that standpoint, but man, Linus is just taking it to the next level. And he's out there having fun, and he's out there, you see him dabbing it up there with Swayman after games. And that combination, I know there have been outlets out there that have been like, oh, you got to trade, you have to trade one of the two goalies, get some pieces for him, which I think is a dumb move. Well, yes, I know you can only play one goaltender, and if maybe you want to trade him in the off season, that's another discussion for another day. But you have one of the best luxuries you can have, having two legitimate number one goaltenders, and you have a legitimate chance at winning a Stanley Cup. So I'm not going to cut off my nose to spite the face in this case. I'm keeping both of those goaltenders. And I mean, right now, after you made the moves for Dmitry Orlov and Garnett Hathaway, you're really you're set. You're kind of set from what you have from that standpoint, because you don't you got your defenseman, you got your top two pairing defenseman, and we already saw he's already made an impact. And the Boston Bruins already had their number. You're not going to touch the number one, the first two lines at all. If you're going to make any improvements, it was going to be to the third or fourth line, as far as maybe getting another score for the third line. And that's more just because Taylor Hall is dealing with injuries, and now Nick Foligno. So maybe if you want to look at maybe adding a depth piece to put in there, but you did get Garnett Hathaway, who can play on that fourth line, maybe move up to the third until some of the injuries subside. But you in Hathaway, you got your big bruiser that can help you in the playoffs, where he was a menace for against the Bruins in some of those playoff runs. So why can't you have him be that same type of physical guy on that fourth line? Now, he's not a pure just enforcer, but because he can play a little bit, but this is a guy that he's going to provide some nice depth on the wing and provide some physicality that can help you on that bottom line. So there, you're not going to, like I said, you're not going to touch those first two lines, and you really, unless you're getting some good depth pieces, you're not going to touch a lot of that third line either. And now with again, and going back to the defense, now that you have Orlov, you have 7 defensemen, so one of them is going to be a scratch every night. So you're loaded on the defensive side. You already have McAvoy and Lindholm, and now you added Orlov. So now you can match Grzelcyk with one of those two lines. And last night it was Grzelcyk with McAvoy on that first line. So, and then having Brandon Carlo as well, who this is Brandon Carlo. I love Brandon Carlo, but this was a guy a couple of years ago was on your top pairing there with McAvoy. And for a little bit, he showed the promise. Maybe he could be that top pair, but he's dealt with some injuries. And so now sliding him down to the third, or maybe to that second pairing, depending on the night, man, this defensive lineup that they have is a really good lineup that they can lean back on the blue line. But this Boston Bruins team has just been so special, and it's so fun to watch. And they're just rolling right along. It's hard to sit here and even nitpick with this team, because there's not much to nitpick with this team. Like I said, right now, the only thing that you kind of have to worry about is those injuries that you have with Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno on this end. But I mean, you're rolling along with Ullmark behind the net, who is just not him alone, but he's helping carry this team. Then you obviously have the superstar David Pastrnak, who's already at 44 goals already. So he's on pace to have 60 plus goals, and one of the first Bruins to have 60 plus in a long time. So this team is just absolutely stacked and ready to go. And I don't think they're going to have to make any major moves here. If it's going to be that, it's going to have to be the rest of the league trying to catch up to them, like teams like the Rangers have tried to do here with adding Patrick Kane, and with the Islanders adding Bo Horvat. So everybody else is trying to catch up to the Bruins at this standpoint. But now that the Bruins have added Orlov and Hathaway, that strengthens them even more, makes them even stronger. So like I said, it's no guarantee that they get to the cup. It's no guarantee that they win a cup. So I'm not gonna just be cautiously optimistic, but I'm not gonna but I'm not gonna cower either. I guess from that standpoint, I'm excited for what this Bruins team can do. They really have shown a lot over this last month or so, as far as the kind of their grit and determination. And they've really shown it all season long, but I've really seen it recently here, though. So I'm really excited with what this Boston Bruins team can do. And I know obviously they've had some. They haven't closed the job since 2011, and I know that's the big criticism. And obviously we can't answer that until the postseason gets here. But it's a legitimate concern because they haven't been able to close it out. But if they're going to ever do it, this might be the best shot they have since 2011 to close out that deal for the Bruins. So I'm really excited to see what happens here. And I think this is a different group. Well, it's a different group with a different mentality, I should say, because you obviously have the core of Pastrnak and Marchand and Krejci, guys that are on that cup winning team in 2011. So they know what it takes. And obviously they played in the 2013 Stanley Cup final. And obviously then a lot more of these guys like McAvoy and David Pastrnak, a lot of those guys were on the team, and Charlie Coyle were on the team for that 2019 2019 Stanley Cup Finals run where they took it all the way to Game 7 and lost. So it's just a matter of closing things out here for the Boston Bruins. So obviously that's something that we can't tell until the end. But I really, really love this team. This team is so exciting and so fun to watch. We move over to the Boston Bruins locker mates, if you will, at the Garden, and that's going to be the Boston Celtics, who themselves are in contention for an NBA title, who are, if not the favorites, right there with the Milwaukee Bucks to win an NBA title. And as we mentioned, they did have a little bit of a bump the other night against the New York Knicks. Now, going into that game against the Knicks, I thought it could be a little bit of a challenge because the Knicks have given them a little bit of run for their money. I didn't think it was going to be as rough as it was last night, but they were without Jaylen Brown, who missed the night, and they really did miss him. Now he's still dealing with the face mask there, is still dealing with the fracture to his face, so he's wearing that protective face mask. And they did miss him. And Jason Tatum, this is where I do have a little bit of concern, because Jason Tatum, who obviously is right in the thick of the MVP race there with Nikola Jokic, Donovan Mitchell, Joel Embiid. So he's right there with everybody. He's right there. But what concerns me is that ever since that first game back from the All-Star break, which was 4 games now in Indiana, when he went up for I believe it was a dunk or a tip in where he got in a little bit of a collision. He landed on top of that left wrist of his. And ever since then, his shooting's been, at least from my standpoint, from my viewpoint, it appears as though his shot has been off somewhat, which is a little bit concerning because obviously he's the engine that makes this whole thing go. I know people want to throw in, Marcus Smart or Al Horford, blah, blah, blah. Like, they're the heart, whatever. But no, Jason Tatum is your superstar. He's a top 5 player in the NBA. He's in the MVP race, but he hasn't been sharp since kind of injuring that wrist, kind of banging it up. Now, to his credit, he's been out there and he's still made a lot of hustle plays. If you go back to a couple games ago with the Boston Celtics, he didn't have his best night on the court, as you mentioned, against the Knicks, and fouled out. But Even like I mentioned a couple nights ago against the Philadelphia 76ers, it was a big game, obviously, because Philadelphia is right there in the playoff mix as well. Some people want to throw them into that contender role. We'll kind of talk about that here in a minute. But in a close game, he didn't have it. But luckily, Jaylen Brown and the rest of the team were fighting, scratching, and clawing, and had a bunch of different lead changes. But Jason Tatum was still making clutch plays, still hustling, making hustle plays, scrapping for the ball on the floor, getting rebounds. And then, of course, at the end of the game, when it counted most, he hit that big time three, tied the game, and then had that. And then he had a tip in as well late in that game as well. So Jason Tatum is just he's going through it right now with I think that's what's causing it. I know some people will want to just put it on. They don't want to acknowledge that, or they don't want to, or they're just saying that it's just some shooting woes, which to me it's caused by I think what happened to that wrist, because it just hasn't been the same. And I obviously I haven't seen him playing too much tonight because I'm doing the podcast right now. So I watched a little bit. He seemed to be okay shooting. He's doing his usual Jason Tatum things, making the hustle plays like we just talked about. But this is a little bit concerning. Now, it's obviously it hasn't been serious to have him miss any games or anything like that. So it's just a matter of it healing up. But that's kind of more of a short-term concern that I have with Jason Tatum, is just the way that he's been shooting. Now, with Jaylen Brown in the lineup, that's where I think it would have been a totally different story there in New York 2 nights ago on Monday night. And that game was, like I said, that game going back to that Knicks game was just frustrating from the standpoint that they at one point they missed 21 out of 22 shots. It was ridiculous. I was just watching it clank and clank and clank, and I'm like, oh my God, what is the Celtics team doing? And if they struggle to shoot threes like they did against the Knicks, then man, this team is in a bind. Now, obviously, they when guys are right and healthy, when you have a Jaylen Brown in the lineup who can drive to the hoop, and when Jason Tatum can do the same thing as well. When you have those guys healthy, then obviously that makes even more of a difference there for the Boston Celtics. But with Jason, just the way things have gone with Jason, just the way that things went over the last couple of games with Jason Tatum, you needed him to kind of pull that performance out of the bag at that point. And nobody, not just Jason Tatum, but the rest of the team outside of Malcolm Brogdon just looked lost the other night offensively. And then defensively late in the game, they couldn't get a stop. But again, I know we're kind of harping on how that's going, but honestly, that's been really the only speed bump was probably that Knicks game, because otherwise the Celtics they're cruising right along as well. They're 44-18. They're a half game behind the Milwaukee Bucks in the standings. So obviously there's no cruise control like you could almost make the case for the Boston Bruins. Not that you can put it on cruise control, but they're still fighting. They're legitimately fighting for that number 1 seed, because right now, in my opinion, it's only Boston and Milwaukee that you can take for serious title contenders out of the East. And honestly, they might be the only ones that I could seriously take as title contenders in the NBA, because for me, I'm not impressed with the Western Conference, because the way things, like the Grizzlies with Ja Morant before the All-Star break, they looked like they were on the upcome, but Ja Morant is just, I don't know what's going on, but he's just kind of fallen off lately. Then you do have the Dallas Mavericks, who did end up getting Kyrie, and despite what the basket case that he can be as far as the head case, I mean, obviously that makes them better, but will it tear that team apart eventually? And I feel bad for Luka from that standpoint. So it's Dallas, the one team, the one team that obviously that you got to keep an eye on And the West is going to be the Phoenix Suns, obviously adding Kevin Durant. But again, that's something you would have to wait until the finals. But honestly, taking it back to the Eastern Conference, yeah, I know people want to throw in the Philadelphia 76ers, but until they show me it, I can't take them seriously because they get bounced in the playoffs in the first or second round lately. They haven't advanced to that Eastern Conference Finals in a while. So I until further notice, it's the Celtics and the Bucks. They're the two main title contenders, if you will, for the Eastern Conference and really for the NBA title. This is kind of like one of the back in the 90s in the NFL where it was the NFC that was pretty much whoever won the NFC was going to win the Super Bowl. And most of the time it was between the Cowboys and the 49ers, throw in the Washington Redskins. That's what they were called back in the day. So YouTube, don't block me or anything because that was their legitimate name back in the 90s. I know they're different now, but we're using their historic name. Just calm down. It's history. Oh, boy. Sorry for losing my mind there, but YouTube rules. Oh, boy. But anyways, it's like back in the 90s with those 90s Cowboys and 49ers teams that were really battling it out for most of the 90s for supremacy. So that's kind of like what it is right now with the Boston Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks. You feel whoever wins the Eastern Conference between those two, they're going to be the one that wins the title this year. Because right now, the Golden State Warriors, yes, they are, we'll call them like the 2018 Patriots from the standpoint that it's the old dynasty. They're still there. You still have Steph Curry. You still have Klay Thompson. You still have Draymond Green. You have Anthony Wiggins. They're there. Andrew Wiggins. You still have that whole core there. So they're still dangerous. You can't count them out. But it feels as though the Celtics are deep across the board with that bench. In Milwaukee, they're not as deep, but they have a very talented starting five with obviously Giannis, and then you have Middleton and Drew Holiday, and Brook Lopez. So they have a good starting five. They may lack a little bit of the depth where the Celtics can make up for it there. But it just seems like these two teams are on a collision course for the Eastern Conference Final, the way things are heading right now. Now, obviously, Steve Paliuca and Whit Grousbeck have both had interviews lately on New England radio, WEEI to be exact. And on his interview with Greg Hill, that's with WEEI, that's where we heard Whit Grousbeck and I believe Paliuca said it as well, but both basically echoing the same statement in one fashion or the other, that it would be nice to have the number one seed, but they've played so well on the road this year that they feel like it doesn't matter from the standpoint of they can't win on the road or they have to be at home. And obviously, the playoffs are a whole nother animal. It's not like being on the regular season, but they do have a point. They are very good on the road this year. They're dominant no matter if they're home or away. So that's not a problem there. But of course, it would be better to have that seventh game back at the Boston Garden, back with your home fans, if it gets to that point where you have a legitimate home court advantage. I know some people want to make a big deal. Oh, you got home field advantage, home court, home ice, whatever advantage in a particular sport. And yes, it's good, but especially in a place like here, like Boston, this is the type of market where home field does actually make a difference, because you have the best sports fans in America I know I'm biased, but you have the best sports fans in America, and I'll put them up any against the world. I know some people want to call Patriots fans frauds because, whoa, you were only here the last 20 years. But trust me, there are still a lot of hardcore fans that are out there. But that being said, the point being is that Boston, especially Celtics fans, are some of the most avid, rabid sports fans that I've seen out there. They protect the Celtics like their child. And like I said, that's New England sport. Those are all the teams. Red Sox fans are like that. Bruins fans are like that. There are Patriots fans that are like that. Obviously Celtics, as we mentioned. So it is a true home court advantage. And if you need evidence, just go back and watch one of those NBA finals or Eastern Conference finals games from the playoffs last year. The Garden is going nuts. It absolutely goes nuts. And there were games where it's hard to hear the announcers, and they even acknowledge it. So it's the Garden goes crazy during the playoffs. So it would be important for the Celtics to actually get home court advantage. So it's going to be important here because they have one more game against the Bucks left, I believe. Is it one or two more against the Bucks that they have? And even with some of the injuries that the Bucks have had, they've won 15 games in a row. Now, obviously, that says something that they had to win 15 to catch up to Boston, but still, it's not going to be any easy task. So if the Celtics can squeak out that first seed, get home court advantage throughout, then that would be just gold. That would just be a cherry on top of the ice on top of the sundae right there. So again, as things are going right now, am I a little bit concerned with Jason Tatum? Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned that maybe hopefully there's not more to that injury than we know about. But again, I'm just not just the way things have gone the last 3 or 4 games with Jason Tatum after kind of banging up that wrist. It hasn't been the same, but again, hasn't been enough to keep him out. So we'll see if once that wrist heals up, then I'll feel a lot better about this. But again, just getting healthy and being ready for that playoff run with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Brogdon and Derek White. I love this Celtics team. They're stacked. Now, obviously, there's going to be more competition for the Celtics than there are for I shouldn't say that because there's good competition in the NHL. But as far as I think the competition's a little more fierce for the Celtics to get to their title than it is for the Bruins. So we will definitely keep an eye on that as we roll through the month of March and get into April. And when we get into April, we'll be a couple weeks away from the playoff for the Boston Bruins and for the Boston Celtics. So we will definitely keep you up to date on that as well. And of course, we talked a little bit about, I mentioned earlier on about the Boston Red Sox and spring training starting. Now, one thing that I didn't get to last week, and that was because, like I said, I had some things going on and had to move things around, and it just didn't work out over the weekend that I could do the podcast here for you. But John Henry, right before spring training games got underway, usually they do a picnic table sit down in Fort Myers, and they kind of go over questions and answer things live in front of cameras. But this year, John Henry didn't sit down in front of cameras, but instead what he did was do a email interview, basically, is what it's called. Or not what it's called, but what it was. And that was kind of the gist of things as far as things were going or that was what happened with John Henry. So basically, in lieu of a TV interview, he did an email interview with select reporters that sent in questions, and he did it with Jen McCaffrey of The Athletic and Sean McAdam of the Boston Sports Journal in a Q&A. And this is where this got me so riled up at the time. It's going to get me riled up again. But this is the quote from John Henry when he was asked about the narrative around his team and how basically the offseason was going with Xander Bogaerts and things of that nature. So this is the actual quote from John Henry. Quote, "There's been a false narrative that we somehow stopped spending, completely unsupported by the facts that we no longer sign free agents, that we are uninterested in or incapable of winning despite our track record. I don't think anyone realizes there are 30 teams in these sports every year and that are all doing everything that you can to win," Henry wrote in a response to McAdam. In a particular year, some clubs are criticized because they aren't going for it. When they are going every single when they are going every single thing they can, short of destroying their futures to win, you always have to keep an eye on the future. And every team, maybe not the Mets, have a budget. It's so easy to fall as we did in 2022 to mediocrity. We need to make changes, but we haven't lost our way. And that's the end of the quote. The part that absolutely pisses me off, how the hell can you say there's been a false narrative around this team? False narrative, John. It's not false. You didn't pay Mookie Betts. You didn't pay Xander Bogaerts. And then you cowardly, this offseason during free agency, instead of taking the 6 years and $160 million that you should have paid him 2 years ago in the spring training in 2021, when you knew this was coming up, or last year during spring training, instead of spitting in his face and giving him a 1 year for $30 million deal and expecting him to eat that pile of shit that's in front of him and be like, oh yeah, this is fine. This is fine. I'll be fine. Yeah, and before anybody sends me any stupid comments, yes, I know. I work a 9-to-5 job every day, and listen, I don't make a shit ton of money either. But listen, sports are different. So let's leave that part of the conversation out. I hate bringing that thing into this because this is in the world of sports where we're talking about apples and oranges. So what Xander Bogaerts was offered was insulting in the world of baseball. And John Henry wants to sit here and say there's a false narrative surrounding this team. No, we can see what's going on, Henry. This isn't the Tampa Bay market. This isn't throw in whatever mediocre market there is out there. This isn't this isn't Toronto. This isn't Tampa. This isn't the Pittsburgh Pirates. It's not Arizona. It's not a mediocre market. We care. We care about baseball. We're passionate fans. We're very smart fans. So to sit here and tell me there's a false narrative that a false narrative about you spending free agents, it's real. It's real. You did not offer Xander Bogaerts that contract until the very end to save face. And in that same email to come out and when Jen McCaffrey asked you in that email session if what could have you have done to brought Bogaerts back, and then you said 12 years. 12? No, what you could have done is instead of jerking him around the last 2 off seasons, what you should have done is taken that 6 years for what was it, 156 or 160 that you ended up offering him at the end of free agency this year. I I can't guarantee, but I can almost bet on it that Bogaerts, if you brought him that deal over the last 2 spring trainings, he would still be here. He would still be here. So don't give me that whole false narrative bullshit, John. Don't. We're way too smart to sit here, and we've watched you trade away one of the top 5 players in baseball in Mookie Betts to the Dodgers, and you got nothing for it back. And you want to tell us that it's expensive to own baseball teams, which yes, it is. And trust me, I know that. And you don't have to tell fans that you want to have a competitive future. Yes, we do too. But guess what? We also want to have a present as well. So you know what the best part about having a present and future? You sign your own superstars. You sign your homegrown superstars, and then you fill the holes with free agents in your minor league talent. You don't just push all the chips to the table and say, oh, we're just going to have a bunch of prospects come up and try to save us. Now, obviously, I know they did re-sign Rafael Devers this offseason. And I was banging the table to re-sign Rafi. So that part I will give them credit for. I will give them credit that they actually signed Rafael Devers. I was actually shocked. I was mildly shocked just because the way things were going, I thought, oh, they're going to have to trade Rafi here, and then they're going to get back a bag of balls because they didn't get anything back for Mookie, and they let Xander Bogaerts walk out the door. But to tell us this is a false narrative? No, it's not a false narrative, John. It's reality. It's reality. We've seen it the last 4 years. We saw it. The moment you fired Dave Dombrowski, we saw it. We knew the writing was on the wall because look at what Dave Dombrowski, he got a world championship for the Red Sox in 2018, brought in JD Martinez, traded for Chris Sale, and in 2016 signed David Price, who was a key figure in the postseason, to a big year, to a big contract, traded for Craig Kimbrell. He went all in, pushed a chip to the table. But guess what? He also, the part that he gets discredited for and that he wrongly gets accused of is draining the farm system, which, yes, did he send some top pieces away? But guess what? He kept the right ones. He kept Devers. He kept Benintendi. And I know Benintendi hasn't developed into like a superstar, but Rafael Devers sure as hell has developed into a superstar, especially with the bat. He drafted Brian Bayo, he drafted Tristan Cassius, and those are 2 of the top prospects in your system. Those weren't Bloom guys. But the point being here, I know I'm getting a little off track, but the point being is that we knew that that reality started the moment you fired Dave Dombrowski, who we see is building a team that made it to the World Series last year in Philadelphia and added Trey Turner in Philadelphia. He's pushing the chips to the table, and that ownership group didn't kick him out the door because he's spending money. Can Steve Cohen buy the Red Sox, please? At least he'll spend money. My God, it's just ridiculous. And listen, I don't want to sound ungrateful for what John Henry has done. The 4 world championships that he brought to this town are 4 that I never thought I'd get to see in my lifetime. Because when you're a Red Sox fan growing up, you're taught because I was probably one of the last generations of Red Sox fans out there that got to experience a little bit of the misery. Because I was 13 years old when Aaron Boone hit the home run. 12 or 13 years old when Aaron Boone hit that home run. And so I lived a little bit through it, and I was taught by family members as far as what the Red Sox went through and read my history. And it's just like you understood. So 2004 was special. I mean, it was special to all Red Sox fans. It's going to be special for eternity. But the point being is that I appreciate them bringing success back to the Red Sox and bringing winning back to the Red Sox. I am very grateful for that. But you can't live on your past just like it sounded like Henry wanted to do in that situation. I appreciate everything you've done, but in sports, it's about the here and now at this point. 2004 isn't going to do anything for me in 2023. It's David Ortiz and Manny Ramirez and Pedro Martinez and Curt Schilling and Keith Foulke are not going to come walking through that door to steal the Rick Pitino quote. They're not. And if they are going to be gray and old. Trust me, I've seen them right now. I mean, Big Poppy's about the only one that I think could actually make a difference because he's the youngest one out of that group. But the point being is that Henry has to stop lying to us. He's saying that the media is lying and that he's putting out that there's false narratives out there. No. And listen, I know people want to take a dump on the media all the time, whatever. Sure, whatever. That's your own prerogative. But in this case, as Red Sox fans, we've seen it. We've seen it with our own eyes. And the man wants to lie to us. The owner of the franchise is lying to us, trying to say that there's a false narrative out there. No, we know you're not spending the money. You're not spending the money. At least up until late. Well, okay. Since 2000. All right, I'll put it this way. You haven't spent the money since 2019, 2020. Because 2018 was the last year that you actually went out there and spent money in free agency. I know okay, all right. Yes, you did sign Trevor Story last year, but that one's backfired on you. And we've mentioned the Bogarts, we've mentioned the Mookie deals. Those things, those have backfired a million times over on you. But my God, this is just absolutely ridiculous to sit here and try to feed this to us. Feed those lies. Why, John? Why are you trying to pull the wool over our eyes when you know it's not going to work? And the part that blew my mind even more was later on in that question and answer session. Basically, it was also that it was a false narrative or false that he was getting booed at the Winter Classic. No, John, those videos are real. I saw them with my own eyes on Twitter and on Instagram. Wow, I said Twitter really weird there. But you get the drift. I saw the videos of you getting booed. I saw the video of those two or three fans sitting outside the player parking lot at Fenway during the Winter Classic saying, "Hey, John, pay Rafi. He's worth it." There were thousands to maybe by now millions of views on that video. And legitimate reporters, legitimate baseball reporters or that sports reporters in this town mentioned it. There were NHL reporters that don't work in this town that reported on you getting booed at Fenway. So don't lie to us and say you didn't get booed. What the hell does that accomplish? Take your oversized ego and shove it. Or maybe it's not an ego thing, but if you're that insecure, I guess that's more John Henry. I wouldn't put him in the ego thing kind of more because that's more the Jerry Jones territory. But as far as the insecurity, if you're insecure getting booed, how about you spend money on your baseball team? It just blew my mind. It's like, we saw it. We all saw the videos. We all saw the tweets by legitimate reporters. And they weren't even, some of them were coming from NHL reporters that were covering the Winter Classic that were like national hockey writers that said you got booed. So don't try to tell us that you didn't get booed. That's just dumb. That is so dumb. We all saw it. Some people were there to hear it. Anyone tell us it didn't happen? So just to say that there's a false narrative, it's just such a it just makes my brain hurt. It's so ridiculous. So ridiculous. But we're stuck with him as our owner. Oh man. I just hope that, man, I just hope that they finally start to spend some money here in the next couple off seasons. And like, I know if you want to look at the stats, I know, yes, they're still within like the top 5, top 7 payrolls in baseball, but some of that's some dead money, some of that's from some trade money that's come off. And now I know obviously signing the Rafael Devers, that changes things. And like I said, I'm happy they signed Rafi, but again, that's still that's you have one of your studs left. You need more to build a foundation. So I don't know. It's just frustrating to me to hear those comments come out of his mouth and expect us to kind of believe to want us to believe it when we've seen otherwise. We've seen what's happened. Now, on the more lighter side or the more entertaining side of baseball, we did get to see the pitch clock come into use. And I will be honest, I love it. It's great. It shaved the time on games, at least during spring training, down to like 2 hours and 24 minutes. They're just flying right by. I love it. And guys have to get in and go. They have to step into the box. They have to be attentive. And then you have the pitchers only have the 20 seconds. And I love it. And listen, is it perfect that like if because there are some instances where you see some of the batters where maybe they might not be directly looking, but they're ready, they're in the box. So I think maybe there's a little bit to quibble with there. But all in all, though, having the 20 seconds in between pitches is great. It's absolutely great. I love it. It's great for the future of the game because we have to attract the youth to the game because you can't just make this a game for people that are 55 or 65 and older. That's for the old crowd. No, you have to keep the sport going and bring new blood into it. You have to make this more attractive to young people. And when there were 4-hour games in a society where kids have problems paying attention to like an hour-long like movie or TV show where they're on their phones all the time or they're always distracted by something, you have to make these games shorter in that standpoint because I'm a baseball diehard. I love baseball. I always will love baseball. It was the first sport that I ever grew up loving and watching, and I always will be a diehard baseball fan. I'll be a P1 baseball fan all the time. It'll always be the sport, no matter what happens, and even in this season with how bad how bad it looks like the Red Sox season could go, or if it's just a mediocre season, I'll still watch. Now, obviously, there'll be some nights if they're a bad team that have like if I have the opportunity to do something else, that it's like, okay, all right, this is a bad team. Do I want to invest this night into it, even though they might not make the playoffs? So there'll be those type of decisions, but I'm still going to keep up. Obviously, if I'm out and about at a bar or a concert, if there's a TV, I'll be looking around the corner to see what the score is and just kind of check up on it. But it's not like in 2018 or 2021 when they're making these runs to the World Series or deep into the playoffs where you're like, oh, I gotta watch every game. These are awesome. These are so fun. I'll be a diehard to the day I die. But for the younger fans out there that you're trying to get to watch the game, that you're trying to attract to the game to make this more appealing to them, you have to do things like this where they're not just going to sit there and be like, man, 4 hours and there's not a lot of action in between. And it really kind of helps with that action because the pitcher's getting the ball and throwing it, and then guys are making contact. They're hitting into outs or hitting home runs. So there's more action. There's more to go. And which is so nice because I'll even be honest, there are some games that are like 3.5, 4 hours long that you're like, oh my God, just get the ball and throw it. For Christ's sake, what are we doing? Just get it and throw it. But they're not. Trust me. It was very much needed. I'm not going to complain anything about it. It's very much what baseball needs. And if you're one of those old school players that's there, you need to adapt and overcome, because this is something that's been needed for a long time. It's well overdue. This is like a minimum 10 years overdue for having a pitch clock in baseball. But finally, they're doing it, and it's paying dividends immediately in spring training. Now, I don't know if it's going to be as quick as is this in the regular season, but I still think even if you factor some other things into it, you're still going to have sub 3 hour games on the average. I'll say probably maybe 2 hours 45 minutes. I'll say that. So I do like, I love the direction that it's going in, and it's been amazing to watch here in spring training as far as just the pace of the game. So I'll be excited when we get to opening day on March 30th to see how this all shakes out here for baseball. So it's definitely a step in the right direction, and a much needed one. So I really love it, really do. Now, that is going to wrap things up here for this week's episode of New England Sports Weekly. And just keep in touch, because next week we will obviously keep breaking down the Boston Celtics and the Boston Bruins. If the Bruins make any additional trades here at the deadline, we will obviously let you know what moves they have made, if they have made any additions. We'll obviously keep you up to what's going on with the Boston Celtics. And with spring training underway, we'll obviously talk a little bit more about the Red Sox getting you ready for the season, in the World Baseball Classic coming up. And of course, if anything happens with the Patriots in the offseason, we will keep you up to date as well on that. And I know we didn't get to it this week, and we normally do. We have our one big bet. Just ran out of time this week, but next week we will definitely get you back in the swing of things with the one big bet segment, and we will get you a little bit of cash in your pocket for you. All right. And that will do it for this week's episode. And as always, you can follow the show on here right on YouTube every night. Wednesday night at 8 p.m. is the live stream. You can catch the show also, if you can't do it live, on Spotify or SoundCloud. Just search New England Sports Weekly wherever you can find your podcast. Grab the show there. Hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube, or hit the like and subscribe on SoundCloud and Spotify as well. You can hit us up on the socials as well. It is New England Sports Week. It's at NE Sports Weekly on Twitter, and on Instagram, it's at NE Sports WK on Instagram. Or if you want to hit me up on my individual socials, it's at Sean_Met28 on Twitter and on Instagram. All right, everybody. Well, you have a good rest of your week, and we will talk to you next Wednesday.